sexual harassment case?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll just start going through the items here. So, it says so summarize sexual harassment law. Who would like to do that?
Ooh, summarize it.
I know, I'm like trying to think of how to summarize it. It's more than discrimination. It's based on well, I just lost my train of thought, so there you go. Someone else had any thoughts?
Phew. Well, I guess my definition of it would just be that it sounds like it's kind of broken out into, I mean, there's the definition of sexual harassment, and even that's pretty broad, but basically it comes down to any advance that's not welcome. And from there, it seemed to me like it was kind of broken out into the quid pro quo harassment or the hostile work environment harassment.
Yeah, and I thought the question on the quiz, I don't know if you guys have taken the quiz yet or not, but there was that question about sexual harassment includes any type of harassment on the basis of gender, behavior motivated by hostility towards one gender, conduct that is disproportionately offensive to one sex. So I thought that was a pretty good summary of it.
Yeah, that is. So a lot of it kind of probably boils down to just offensive behavior, offensive things. I don't know.
Yeah, sexual harassment is such a hard one because it can be so many different things. It could be that you made a joke at work and it makes it a hostile work environment, and so there's so much to watch out for with it. And that's what I got out of it. It's such a vague law that it can be interpreted so many different ways, and so you have to be really careful with it.
I agree. Well, and I just remembered, like, and it really depends on your work environment too. Like, and people could take offense to something that you may not think is sexual harassment, which they could take that way. So, yeah, you do have to be careful.
Good. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that the Martinez story, the case that sexual harassment happened. So it was quid pro quo or a hostile work environment.
I'm going to vote for hostile work environment on that one.
What was the beginning of the question? I missed it. Sorry.
Just so talking about the case, it was a story of kind of the boss that came in early to work on the project, and he overheard Martinez, one of the coworkers, just eventually, you guys know which case I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
It's calling it the Martinez story. Is it quid pro quo or a hostile work environment? What type of sexual harassment?
Sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think it's a hostile work environment. Well, because, it could be either one. I feel because it is her boss, but I don't, like, it's not like, no, it could be quid pro quo because it's not like if you sleep with me or if you don't sleep with me, then you're fired type of thing. So unless there is something more behind the scenes, but it doesn't sound like it's that way. It's just someone who happens to be her boss doing inappropriate things and saying inappropriate things to her.
Yeah, I think it's possible that it was a quid pro quo situation. We definitely weren't given that information in the case, but it's a possibility, but more, safely, it's definitely a hostile work environment because Martinez obviously felt threatened by her boss, and I mean, pretty clear break of the rules there.
Most definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So DaCosta, that was the name. That was the name of the guy in the case. So next question says, from reading the note on sexual harassment, do you think DaCosta got accurate advice when he called the counsel's office? So I'll start out on this one. As I was reading the case, I was kind of surprised by. I don't know. I guess I was surprised and not surprised by. Well, first, DaCosta kind of wanted to be anonymous with his report, and I guess I was just kind of aggressive. The lawyer was that he eventually started talking to, and I mean, obviously it's a big deal, but there was really no giving him any comfort, or I don't know. I thought she was pretty abrupt with the situation, but I guess it's appropriate just because it is a big deal and needed to be taken care of.
And I felt like the attorney or the counsel that he talked to had a few valid points in that because he did find out about it, and even though it was accidental in that sense, I think he does carry a certain amount of responsibility because he knows. And then she made a good point when she said that, what if then something happens, well, I can't find it, but essentially, what if something happens, a couple months down the road and she files a lawsuit and then he gets on the stand and has to tell the truth that, yeah, he knew and he chose to not do anything about it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that the note on the law said that, there are internal procedures. So I don't know that the counsel gave him accurate advice in that regard, because it seems to me like that there should be steps, procedures in place that would take place before he go to the EEOC. If I'm reading this right.
I think that's a hard thing, is like she doesn't want, she like can't take it anymore, and she's trying to find ways to get around it without having to have confrontations and things that will stir up things regarding sexual harassment. So she's like, oh, I'll just transfer type of thing, but he doesn't think that that will really happen. But I mean, I just think about, I mean, this doesn't have to do with sexual harassment, but like with my husband's company, my father-in-law is a partner, and he discovered another partner committing fraud, and he's like, it's the law that if I don't do something about it, then I could be thrown in jail for it. Like, it's not that extreme, but there's I think a lot of different business laws, company laws, that if you find out about something, like, you definitely will be held liable for like knowing things. And I could see a lot larger problems down the road if like they were in court or something like that. You would have to say it, and especially if he's in a higher up position, which I don't remember if it said what he was or not. He probably did, but he could get you in a lot of trouble, and it could cause a bigger mess for the company as well as for the individuals involved.
else to add on that? Anybody?
Well, and maybe DaCosta, maybe his first move should have been to actually, I'm sure they have an employee handbook. I'm sure there's procedures in place. I'm sure his company has a harassment policy. So he probably could have, although I understand, sometimes you're not thinking clearly in situations like that. And so, maybe part of what he could do next, since he's not comfortable calling the EEO, is to look up what, their internal procedures are and maybe use that as his next step.
I think that's a good idea. And usually, typically, there's sexual harassment training as well. I don't know if that happened there or not, but I mean, usually they do have some type of internal something that will be able to help him know what he needs to do that probably isn't as extreme as going to the EEO.
Yeah, I agree. From the reading, it seems like it should follow internal procedures first, and then if nothing's happening from there, then it should be reported.
And I've seen, in my company, there's a kind of a group of lawyers that you can call. I guess they're kind of on call, kind of like this. I mean, and that's been helpful for me in some situations when I didn't know what was going on, or I didn't know. I thought I knew what I should do, but I just want to make sure by the law in different scenarios. I don't know. I just thought that was helpful. So I don't know. I guess my point is I think that's a good idea to have kind of that front line, and then if it really gets serious, you can escalate it from there.
Yeah, Martinez might be a little more comfortable doing the internal procedures first than, jumping to the EEO as the, next thing.
So is to go around, and so Jack DaCosta's kind of in a pickle at this point, right? He's reported this initially, and Julia Martinez has said, he brought her in, and she really didn't want to report it. So, question it. Let's go around to everybody. What would you do if you were Jack DaCosta? After you pull Julia in and she's kind of upset with you kind of for contacting the lawyer, what would you do at that point? You want to start us off, Amanda?
I'm trying to think. That's such a hard thing. I think the right thing to do, I think he still has an obligation to report it just because he doesn't know if there are other women being violated as well. So I think even though that she's upset, I think he still needs to report it, but I know that's a hard thing. But I just think that would be the best solution, in my opinion, to everything and not having a bigger mess down the road as well, and maybe protecting other women that aren't saying anything either.
Marnie, anything to add?
I completely agree with Amanda. Even though Julia's uncomfortable and wants to take care of it herself, he absolutely has an obligation to take another step. I'm not sure what he'll choose to do, obviously, but if I were in his shoes, I would look up again what I mentioned before. I would look up and see what the company policy was, and he probably has a superior who he needs to go to. In fact, they probably have an HR person, I'm sure, who it probably needs to be reported to, so that they can try and pursue some sort of, fix. And it's going to be a tough thing, but I think that's the right thing to do. Even if Julia says no, he still needs to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It needs to happen because if something else is going on in that office and someone else does decide to sue the company for it and he knew about it, then it's going to look really, really bad. And so, I don't know, my first step if I were him would be to sit down with her and explain that standpoint, and then try to have her write down the instances of where it's happened. Because if she writes down dates and what happened on those dates and what time of day it was and things like that, then it's going to be a lot easier to present that to the EEOC, and they're going to be a lot more accepting of it, and they're going to push it a lot harder.
I agree as well. I don't think Jack has any to report it. And my thoughts were kind of going, how would I go about explaining that to Julia? You mentioned her husband, who's seems kind of like a crazy guy, who's would quote unquote take matters into his own hands. And I think it's easy to say, yeah, Jack has to go and do it, but I'm just trying to. I guess all you could do is point out why I would be obligated to share that, and why she really does need help, needs to get this out in the open and fix so she can be protected.
I think if Mr. DaCosta assures her that he will do everything he can to, keep it confidential and keep it between the parties that need to know and not share it with anybody else. Hopefully Julia would be assured, there's really no, I'm not saying hide it from her husband, but it should be kept in the workplace. And so in that regard, she shouldn't have a fear of her husband finding out, because hopefully it can get resolved at work. Do you know what I mean? I'm not trying to say hide it, but if he assures her that he's going to keep it confidential and take the right steps, maybe that'd make her a little comfortable.
Yeah. I agree. You think there'd be some privacy that be put around the situation, at least as much as possible. I mean, probably at work it would spread around, but it's not like they're going to post a newspaper article about it or anything like that. And she could keep it as private as she wanted,
Yeah, no one else should know besides her and DaCosta and the guy doing it, Mr. French or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
That is, unless he's doing it to other people, then yeah, that's kind of a tricky situation.
So this is an interesting question. Goes on to ask, does anything prevent Julia Martinez's boss from firing her for this? Is Julia at risk for losing her job?
Well, I think that goes more into the quid pro quo. Well, however you say that, harassment. He's like, well, I'm gonna fire you because you said something. Like it's against the law. Like he shouldn't be allowed to do that. Because that still has to do with the sexual harassment.
And that's exactly all the more reason for DaCosta to take another step with this so that that doesn't happen. Because I think something might well, we don't even know if Mr. French has the capability of firing, right? Of firing her if he were to find out about this.
Well, they said that he was her boss, but I don't know like what level or what. I don't.
Well, I think this is a perfect example of quid pro quo, because now that either of them bring it up, if he does anything at this point, like firing her or anything, it just confirms what he did, and so she's protected in bringing it up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it kind of ensures that nothing else will happen to her because
Exactly.
Jack knows, and Jack's reported it, so, you know, French would have to be very careful.
I think with all HR issues, you can't retaliate, right? So even if somebody brings up a concern to an HR concern to an HR representative or their boss, if you retaliate in any way after they do that and don't have a good reason other than retaliation, then you can get in trouble, right? I mean, I think with anything,
Yeah,
retaliation.
I agree.
Exactly. So when something's brought up about you, you're going to be watched really closely, right? So if you do something in retaliation, they're going to know that it was retaliation for what happened.
Yeah.
Okay. So now it tells us to break into kind of different roles. There's 4 different roles, so there's 4 of us, so it actually works out pretty well. The instructions are we are to consider what to include in a company's sexual harassment policy. So there's different roles here, and I'll just go through the list here and assign them. Let me give out the rules and then we'll recap what we need to think about. So, Amanda, do you want to be the legal counsel, so like the lawyer from the case? Um, Marnie, do you want to be a bystander? So I guess that would be what's his name again?
Kind of like the Costa
Yeah,
situation.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Um, Michael, do you want to be the victim?
Sure.
And I'll take the less glorious role of the accused harasser. so, um, so again, it says maybe we'll take 3 to 5 minutes here and just consider what in that role what you would want, what your rights would, or what with your role what you would want to be in the company's sexual harassment policy. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So just we'll take a few minutes here. Just pipe in when you're done. I'm ready when y'all are.
Yeah, I think so.
I guess I am. I'm not entirely sure what I'm thinking, but
Let's go for it.
Okay. Michael, you want to start us off? What, as a participant, what would you like to see in a sexual harassment policy?
So, I guess the first thing that I want to see in a sexual harassment policy would be a clear expectation of what sexual harassment is, and that the company does not allow it, if that makes sense. So just basically clearly stated what sexual harassment is, and then what the company is going to do about it, basically what they're not going to be accepting of, because then it's easier for me to do something about it if something does come up. The second thing that I would like to see would be basically so my avenues that I could take if I were a victim, what I could do if sexual harassment happened to me, if that makes sense at all. And then the third thing that I would like to see is what the consequences for sexual harassment would be.
Do you mean the
So you would like
consequences for
those defined? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So for the perpetrator, if that makes sense. So like if somebody harassed me sexually, what would the consequences for them be?
Gotcha.
So nothing's in the dark. I know what's going to happen. Everybody knows what will happen if sexual harassment takes place.
I think to add to that, those consequences, being the lawyer, I think I'd want to make sure that, like, government consequences, like legal consequences, are added in there too. Like, what could happen to those who do sexually harass, like not just within the work environment, but outside as well. And I think adding to that, like what we've already discussed, like being a person that finds out about someone else being sexually harassed, like they need to report it, and they'll be companies and supervisory employees will be held liable for any knowledge of any sexual harassment and not doing anything about that. And so I think those are also very important things to make sure they're in there so people are aware if they do come across it or whatever.
Good. Marnie, what about as a bystander?
So as a bystander, I would want to make sure that there will be no repercussions or liability for me for reporting the incident. So basically no negative, consequences that would, affect my job. And also that there would not be any retaliation or what's the word? Like I wouldn't want either party to somehow then be able to get me involved, if that makes sense. So basically my own personal rights are protected by either from the perpetrator or, the party that I'm trying to protect as the victim.
So basically like a whistleblower policy type thing.
Thank you. Yes. Perfect.
Okay, good. As the accused harasser, I think the key word is accused, right? would want a chance to respond to accusations saying that I was sexually harassing them, then I would definitely want a chance to, maybe they're false and to defend them if need be. And then also, I think this would mostly involve when I was found not guilty, for lack of a better word, would want as much privacy as possible. So obviously my supervisor would probably have to know, but other than that, I would hope that it would be a matter that wouldn't spread throughout the entire company. So I guess only the most important people that needed to know, they're the only ones that would know about it, and it wouldn't be a loose topic. That's what I had. So good. I think what this assignment's going to turn into. So I think what I'm gonna do here is kind of a sexual harassment policy, what we would put for Lone Star. So I got all your ideas written down here, and we can kind of, or I can turn that into a policy that we can turn in. So anyone want to respond or on any of the points that we brought up, or anything else to add?
I don't.
Probably something else. I'm thinking of just one thing, and unfortunately it stems from personal experience. There needs to be something written into that harassment policy when the employee needs to know what to do when it's their boss. Because, a lot of times the internal policy, is that the right? Yeah, the internal procedure is that you go to your supervisor, and then they would go to their supervisor, or whatever the case may be. But when it's that supervisor, or in this case, the president of the company, an employee needs to know what to do in that situation.
I think it's really important to have something built into your policy as well as into your company, like an HR department or somebody that's a third party that you can go to that's not going to be a superior or anything like that, so you feel comfortable going to them that there won't be repercussions to you and that you have another avenue rather than going to the person that's harassing you.
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Okay, so now I'm supposed to read what actually happened in the real case.
Oh, good.
Has anyone read this?
Nope.
Okay. So when Jack called corporate counsel, he forgot about caller ID. The lawyer used the information he gave her to figure out the people he was talking about. She contacted the Lone Star EEO, which launched a formal investigation. The EEO tried hard to get Martinez to cooperate. French denied all charges, claiming that Martinez had made up her story to protect herself from pending layoffs. DaCosta was asked for evidence, but he didn't have any. Julia Martinez's husband, following up, beat up Julia and forced her to quit. French survived the investigation with only a bruised reputation. He blamed everything on DaCosta for calling corporate counsel. There was so much animosity between DaCosta and French that DaCosta left the company after 3 months.
That's not what I wanted to hear.
It's kind of sad, huh?
Really unfortunate, but I think that's reality a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating in situations like that almost always the victim loses and the perpetrator wins. Because it is so hard in situations like that to have evidence, that's that's the hardest part. I mean, you know, in the story, you know, he puts her hand down her shirt. I mean, it's not like you can take a picture or, you know what I'm saying? So it's always one person's word against another's, against another.
And I think that's one place where it's really important. I used to work in an HR department, and one of the most important things with these types of claims is recording, because you don't have evidence. It's one person's word against another, and so recording specific days and what happened specifically, because if you have that record, it makes it a lot easier to make your case.
And I think what happened too is, at least what happened in mine, I was brave enough to come forward and do something about it, and tried to file charges against my boss. And not until I was brave enough to do that, then did other people come out of the woodwork and admit that it had been happening to them, because they were afraid of retaliation. They were afraid of losing their jobs. And anyway, it's just interesting how sometimes it's just really important to stand up for yourself. And even though I think it's normal to be scared of personal retaliation, but thank goodness we have the gospel. I mean, I think that was the main thing. I mean, I knew that I would be protected. Heavenly Father would protect me, and he did. But it's just interesting how, you know, sometimes people then in a weird situation, unfortunate situation like that, other people look to our example and say, wow, you were really brave. You know, that's been going on for years, and I've wanted to say something, and I couldn't bring myself to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's interesting.
I mean, it's really
I think that was
sad.
another part of that. I think that was another part of that result that when you read it, you said that she refused to cooperate with them, and so at that point, out of the fear of not cooperating, it just made her she couldn't take.
What was the part of what you said, Michael? It kind of cut out.
Just that from the results, it said that she refused to cooperate with them after they were trying, and so that refusal to cooperate made it so. I imagine in that situation where you can't mount a case at that point because the person who was the victim wouldn't cooperate, and so it makes you wonder, was it real if she's not going to cooperate with us or not? And so that refusal to cooperate almost makes it look like it didn't really happen.
Yeah, that's where it's tricky, because so often, I think you see that a lot. I mean, I don't see it a lot, but you hear about it in the news in domestic violence cases, right?
Yeah.
Where they are afraid, and understandably so, but unfortunately they back down, and then you can't help them. You want to help them, but the law can't if they won't fully cooperate. And it's scary. It really is.
Yeah.
It's just sad. Plain sad.
Yep.
I think the main thing that would have helped here is if Dakota, or I keep forgetting her name. Martinez is her last name. If she would have had like a clear, maybe even a third party to just voice these events to, I think she would have been a lot more likely to than if it was somebody in the, so one of you made that point. I think that would have helped the most in this case, is if she just could have gone to a third party where she could report it, maybe even anonymously, and then they could do the investigation on him. I think she would have felt more comfortable.
Yeah, I think so. I know I would be. more comfortable if I wasn't talking directly to someone I was working with. Especially when it comes to like sexual harassment things, I just think hit on a whole nother personal level, and I think it like that's just one area that is really uncomfortable for most people to talk about, especially if it's like inappropriate things among other people that you work with.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have to admit I hate group work, but these have been a couple good conversations. So you guys make it good and break the the monotony of that, I guess. So I appreciate it. It's been good talks, and I've learned a lot.
Okay, so we need to figure out what we're doing with the hypothetical problem.
Oh yeah. Is that
Yeah, because that
due
get
next
written
week?
this week, right? Because it's due next Saturday.
Is it this Saturday or is it next week?
No, I'm sorry, next week. So the 14th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. I was thinking it was this week, so I was having a little panic moment.
Oh, well, am I wrong? Because it
I
said
don't
week
know.
5,
No, it's 5,
but
I believe.
that's this week.
Looks like it's due on February 11th, is what I'm looking at right now.
Oh, I'm not even seeing it on there.
Yeah, lesson 5 Saturday. So that actually is the 14th.
Yeah.
So, it would be nice to know sooner than later what I'm doing since I'm so busy.
Do we want to divide up the 4 topics like we talked about?
I think that's a good idea, but
Did you guys have a chance to participate in last week's class discussion? I watched it after the fact.
yeah, I was going to, and then I didn't, so I haven't seen it yet.
I watched bits and pieces of it.
Okay, so basically what Brother Bonnie suggested was that, because there are 5 of us in the group, and so basically what should happen is 4 people should actually write their topic or issue, and then the 5th person then just becomes in charge of putting it all together as the paper that gets submitted, as well as being the class or the group discussion leader next week. And then he suggested that we rotate that. So like whoever puts that paper together next week, then someone would do it week 7 and week 9 and week 11 if that. So everyone gets a turn to actually put the paper together.
That makes sense.
A time off from having to write something. So I kind of like that. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
Zach, were you asking if anybody had heard from?
Has anyone heard?
I haven't.
Did you say, has anybody heard from Brent? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I responded to him, but I think that was last week, and it was just, he gave us his email address way back when.
Oh. Yeah, I think if we send him an email, he'd respond better, because I just don't think he checks the community.
And if I'm not mistaken, he did put his comments on the hypothetical problem, if I remember right.
Yes, he did.
Okay, thanks. So,
should we determine the 4 problems we want to go with, and then just we can take whatever assignment we want, which one we want to write?
Yeah, I think so. Well, with these last 2 weeks, I think for sure, well, I don't know about you guys, but part of the policy definitely needs to be sexual harassment because that is a problem at the doohickey company.
Yeah.
Are you guys in agreement that can be one of the topics?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then last week we talked about diversity, so should that be one of them as well?
I think that's a big one.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What should
And
the
then
other two be?
I think another one should be like there was a lot of. I'm trying to think how I would say this, but with performance, there was a lot of. I think there was a disconnect between the leadership and the employees. So maybe we could just say performance appraisals, or I don't know, maybe just performance for now.
Okay.
And if you guys wouldn't mind, I would kind of like to do that one.
You'd like to do that one? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Zach, you said that, right?
Yes.
Okay. What should the fourth one be? Let's see.
What did I gotta go through what I.
Do you have that document up, Amanda, by chance?
Yeah. Let me look through.
Oh, there we go.
Communication's a big one. I don't know if there's really. I feel like diversity is the biggest one in there. Workers look tired and unmotivated. And I feel like that kind of correlates with and there was a lot of stuff that they just had to throw away because it wasn't usable type of thing, and I feel like that area just can go with the Auto Wizard and possibly the Army Crew and Bednar's talk about where motivation comes from within, and the Auto Wizard where the leader that could get brought into leadership as well, where the leader and Auto Wizard all he really probably needed to do was do a formal meeting, and he didn't look at what his team members how they could get motivated, and so I think that was a big problem with that case, was just lack of motivation type of thing. So I think that was that could be hit on.
So do you think you would combine motivation with training? Is that what you're thinking, Amanda? Or just leave it as motivation and teamwork, or
managing, because it said also that the manager was insecure and there was so maybe motivation. I don't know.
That could probably be summed up in the lack of leadership, I would say. Lack of quality leaders.
Was that already one of the topics, was leadership?
We had talked about it last week being maybe one of them.
So what are the three that we have right now?
Sexual harassment, diversity, and performance are the three we have now. We're kind of unclear on what the fourth one should be.
Yeah, I say we just go with leadership.
Leadership.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, so let's see. I could do the sexual harassment if you want.
Sounds good. I would prefer to write for next week because we've got a baby coming next weekend, so I'm afraid that if I'm the one to put it together and submit it, that I won't get it in on time.
Okay.
Whatever. To the topics, and I can put together, or we can have Brent. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you prefer. Probably just. So I can either put the paper together, and I can just be the discussion leader for that week, or I can. On a topic, we can give Brent the time to put the paper together.
Michael, would you have time to write up anything, or you just feel like you don't have time to do any of those?
I can write up. I can definitely write stuff up. Sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I just don't want to put the whole paper together and submit it all in the end.
Gotcha. Okay, well, could you do one? So Amanda, it sounds like you wouldn't mind putting it together then?
I can do either one. I wouldn't mind putting it together, or I
think that'll work because it sounds like Brent's been contributing and everything to the document and all that, so he should be able to write it up and everything, I imagine. Write his portion up, and then if you put it together, Amanda, I think that'll work.
Okay. So maybe you just take one of the last two topics and we'll just give Brent whatever's left. Just tell him that's his assignment.
I can take leadership.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Okay.
Yep.
You'll have diversity. Okay. Maybe I'll shoot him an email and just let him know that, since it seems like that's the fastest way he communicates.
Okay. And do you just want us to email you our portion, Amanda?
And put it on the Google.
Okay. I'll put mine on the Google Doc then.
Okay. Either way, it's
Say
fine.
Google Doc, Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Do you guys think most of you are going to use kind of the same format as the sample paper? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do, and I think we should, both because it got a good grade and it seemed like a pretty simple format that make it easier for Amanda to put it together if we all followed it,
Okay, yeah, that seemed good to me too, because it seemed like there was kind of this synopsis, and then what the problem was, and then what the solution was, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll do that.
Okay.
All right, sounds great.
I'll get this week's
Have it done
assignment
by-
submitted for us.
I'm sorry, what was that, Zach?
I just said I'll get this week's assignment submitted for us.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe let's plan on having your paper, like everything put, have your portion next week.
Do you want that done by Tuesday, Amanda?
Next Tuesday would be great. I was saying Wednesday, but Tuesday would be even better.
Okay. I'll have it done.
Okay, and then we'll meet same time next week, and Amanda, then you'll be the class or group discussion later too.
Alrighty.
Thanks, guys. We'll see ya.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
Great. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay.